Hi everybody, Stephen D here, and today I'm here to talk to you about the most horrific, imminent danger to our way of life, to America, to its citizens, to the lives of our people, to our freedoms. Gosh, what am I talking about? The war on terror? Syria? Iraq? Iran? Russia? Of course not. I'm talking about climate change. Now, before you just dismiss that out of hand, let's consider a couple of things. Last year alone, the cost of events, severe weather events related to climate change in the United States alone was in excess of $25 billion. And it's only going to get worse. And that's just, severe weather events. It doesn't include things like, loss of our food supply, destruction of the oceans, rising sea levels. No, that's just from severe weather events. Guess what we spent last year, on climate change, kind of do something about it? $20 billion. We spent less on climate change, to address the issue of climate change, than we had to spend on the cost of these severe weather events brought to us by climate change. Now, we know that our military has said numerous times that it sees climate change as a looming and probably the largest national security threat this century. So, how much money are we spending to deal with climate change? $20 billion? Okay. Well, how much money are we spending on our military then? The ones that are concerned about climate change being a national security threat. The Pentagon, those people. Well, if you eliminate what they're spending, because their budget includes money spent to deal with climate change related issues in the military. But if you take that off the top, they're spending about $600 billion last year, or this year I should say, $600 billion on the military budget. And that doesn't really even include the war costs we're incurring. $600 billion is way up here compared to $20 billion, which is way down below the bar where you can't see my hand. Now guess what? We're doing even better things for the oil and gas industry. I mean, I'm not talking about fighting wars in the Middle East to protect our pals in Saudi Arabia and in the Gulf Emirates and our access to their oil. No, I'm just talking about subsidies. Freebies. Guess what? We give the oil and gas industry more subsidies than we spend on climate change. Over $20 billion a year in subsidies. And that doesn't even include things like allowing them to write off as a standard business deduction cleanup for oil spills. Get this, listen to this, is a classic. You remember the Deep Horizon? I mean, it's out in the theaters now, it's a movie. But it's an actual real event. The Deep Horizon, spill cost British Petroleum $33 billion to clean up. That's what they ended up coming up to, is a nice round number. Guess what? They get to deduct most of that from their taxes. What a deal! Do you get to deduct stuff from your taxes when climate change walks in your door and blows your house down with a tornado, or floods out your neighborhood, or burns your property to the ground? Do you get to get a tax deduction if you die of heat stroke? Well, of course not. You're dead. But I mean, can anybody claim it? Oh, no. So, that's the marvel of this. That's the wonder. Here's the deadliest danger we face this century to life on Earth. As many of you know, we've already passed a critical mark in runaway climate change, runaway global warming. And that's the 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. We've passed that threshold. We're never going to go back down, absent somebody inventing giant carbon dioxide scrubbers, like out of some fantasy science fiction film. So we have global warming locked in. We have rising sea levels locked in. We have extreme weather locked in for the next, I don't know how many centuries. And it could be worse, since a large part of that warming is in the Arctic, which is freezing stuff and allowing releases of other greenhouse gases like methane that had been frozen underneath a blanket of ice and snow in the tundra. We now have all that methane bubbling up. A greenhouse gas that is hundreds of times more efficient and fast at driving the temperature higher. And yet, we're worried about Syria. We got to have regime change in Syria because that might help the Russians, the Chinese, gain a geopolitical advantage regarding the oil resources to Iran and Iraq, and the same oil that is driving up. The more we burn it, the more we're screwing ourselves. Here's another number I'll throw out for you. It's a number that's been calculated. I'll have links for all these numbers, by the way, my sources, if you read in the description to this video. But since 9/11, we spent, to date, $3.6 trillion in costs related to the war on terror. $3.6 trillion in 15 years. That comes out to $240 billion per year. And what has that got us? You feel more secure? I don't. I mean, I'm sure it's made some military contractors extremely rich, obscenely rich. I'm sure it's advanced the careers of numerous senior executives, military careerists. But has it done anything for our country? Has it done anything for the world? Has it done anything to prevent this ongoing, catastrophic, anthropogenic climate disruption? That it's apparent to everybody, unless of course you're Donald Trump, or you believe in the tooth fairy, or you think that it's all part of God's plan. Well, if you think it's all part of God's plan, you're probably not listening to this video anyway. And yet, who's the other candidate that's running for president. Does she have a plan to deal with climate change? Not really. I mean, she says she does. But this was the same person as Secretary of State who traveled the globe trying to convince and persuade other countries to allow U.S. companies to go in there and frack their oil and gas. The same one who was, for the KXL pipeline until she was against it. The same one who obviously doesn't have a lot of urgency, doesn't see a lot of urgency, because I don't see her speaking out about climate change a whole bunch. Do you? I mean, she's all on the warpath about, pardon the pun, Donald Trump and how dangerous he would be if he was president and given the launch codes to our nuclear weapons. And yet, what's her plan in Syria? No-fly zone. Potential, uptick in the risk of global war with a nuclear armed power in Russia. Maybe instead of spending all this money on wars to gain a little bit of an advantage, to grab resources, oil resources, fossil fuels that are contributing to the most dangerous and imminent threat to our nation's history and to the world's history, maybe instead of doing that, we should come up with a better plan. One that doesn't involve spending billions and trillions of dollars on war machines and war costs and people's lives. Maybe we should stop subsidizing an industry that is literally killing us, not just by promoting a product that pollutes our environment, not just by polluting the oceans and our fresh water reservoirs with oil spills. Maybe we should do something else with all that money. That's my thought for the day. You can maybe ask the candidates why they're so worried about Russia and Syria and the danger there, and yet they're not talking about climate change, or as I prefer to call it, anthropogenic climate disruption. Actually, it's more, even better, anthropogenic climate destruction. Because by ignoring it, we're allowing the greatest enemy we've ever faced to gain the upper hand on us. And that enemy is ruthless. And that enemy does nothing for human life. Nothing. So, that's all I have for you today. Stephen D. signing off. Make sure you check the sources, the links I leave in the bottom of this video. And I'll see you when I see you. Thanks, everybody. Take care.